I have 33 employees, and I think I always take the human approach to business, whether internally with the team, but also with the types of leads we get introduced to. And I think it's really paid off well, for how successful we are. We've never spent any money on advertising.
Well, if you've always wanted to have SEO done on your website, which is search engine optimization, the work that goes into your website to help it rank higher in the search results, you're going to love today's episode because we're talking to an SEO expert, Damon Burton out of Utah. So stay tuned in just a few moments and we'll dive right in on the Finally Marketing That Works podcast. Well, hello and welcome to another edition of the Finally Marketing That Works podcast. I'm your host, Mitchell Slater. I'm here with another new friend, Damon Burton out of Utah. And this guy, he has articles on Forbes that you can write. He has a super duper successful SEO agency and super just awesome guy to begin with. So Damon, how you doing today, sir?
Doing good. When you said super duper, I thought you were going to talk about my beard.
And that's the other thing he has, because I don't have any hair. And he has more hair than me.
A super duper beard. Well, thanks for having me.
You bet, man. I'd love you just to introduce yourself, tell a little bit of people about what the day in the life of Damon looks like, and about your agency. And you can even talk about what beard products you use to make that thing look so lush and full.
The beard is just a giant lie. Like, if you could see it up closer, it's not as grandiose as these filters make it look. So, I've been married 15 years, father of 3. Started an SEO company in 2007 called SEO National, and just kind of stayed in my lane. I never wanted to be an agency owner that says they did it all and is mediocre at all of it. And so we just stick to SEO. We do a lot of design because it comes with the territory, but so SEO National for the last 14 years, worked with, we still have our mom and pop clients that have been with us for the entire 14 years. We have awesome retention rate. And then on, the newer, bigger end is like NBA teams, Shark Tank featured businesses. We've worked with a couple $1 billion brands. I think we're up to our 4th one we're working with right now. So it's been cool. Meeting, just like we were talking before the podcast, you meet cool people, and it's been the same thing in the journey of building this company. I have 33 employees, and I think I always take the human approach to business, whether internally with the team, but also with the types of leads we get introduced to. And I think it's really paid off well, for how successful we are. We've never spent any money on advertising. Wow. So it's just all been growth through referrals and social proof and just building those relationships.
Man, way to go. That is incredible. And you obviously, speaking about $1 billion companies and NBA teams. So if you think about an NBA team, do they need SEO? And if they need SEO, why do they need SEO? If they're just, everybody knows the Chicago Bulls and the Boston Celtics. So I'd love to dive into that a little bit. What do they use your agency for?
Yeah, it's when I give you the answer, you're going to be surprised, and then afterwards you're going to go, duh. So it's because you know how they say, well, the Chicago Bulls is a franchise. The keyword is franchise, right?
Yeah.
So by definition, they are a franchise, and so more or less, the NBA owns the rights to the Chicago Bulls. The NBA owns the rights to the Utah Jazz, and of course, the Utah Jazz own the rights, too. But there's like this gray line where it's like the Jazz are not the only team or outlet that can sell their merchandise because they are a franchise, and so they have to fight for visibility to sell their own merchandise. And so there are other outlets that can sell Chicago Bulls merchandise and whatever other team's merchandise, so they need to increase visibility as well to sell their product just like anybody else.
Interesting. And is the NBA, I know that I follow more of the NFL than anything, and I know that if you sell a jersey, it goes to a whole pool of, this is how I understand it, like if you sell merchandise, it goes to a pool and they distribute it evenly between all 32 teams. No matter if you sold $1 million in jerseys and this team sold $100,000 in jersey, it's going to be distributed evenly.
I'm not familiar with that. I would be surprised if that's the case. I mean, I don't know what they do with their money, so I honestly couldn't tell you, but It would be surprising if that's the case, because then it wouldn't really make sense to incentivize teams to amplify their visibility and sell their own merchandise. So I don't know. Interesting question.
Oh, that's super cool. And then obviously billion-dollar brands. I know you mentioned, and when I was doing research on you beforehand, some Shark Tank brands. So these ones that have they been the ones that actually got invested from sharks on Shark Tank, or just ones that were on the show?
They were just on the show, and I won't say who they are because it's funny. By the owner's own words, it was like a massive failure or dramatically embarrassing, and it was like a big learning lesson for them, where they went on and they talked about, you know, the investments and the growth and things like that, and the sharks dug in on just like one little kind of insignificant thing that really didn't matter, but I think in the way that the company presented it, it seemed like a bigger deal than it was, because I'm aware of what the issue was that they got beat up on, and it is completely insignificant, and it was years in the past. And so it was interesting to see the sharks like hover around this one thing that had kind of nothing to do with where they're at now, and definitely nothing to do with where they're at in the future. It was like this road bump that they conquered, and our years, like literally years passed. It wasn't this thing that just happened 6 months ago or a year ago. It was like 7 years ago. So it was fun to watch them, though, because it was so cringy, but I can only say that because the client said so themselves.
Man, oh, that's still cool that you get to work with ones that have been on the show and you've seen and watched the cringiness. That was one of my favorite shows. I mean, I even know people that aren't even into business, and they just love that show. And you know, I've met Kevin O'Leary before at a conference I went to, and the speech he did, he made me laugh, like, with what he talked about. He talked about his son. The long story short was, he made his son work for what he had, and he said that one of the things he does is he made a living, gosh, what's it called, a living will, or whatever it was, for when he dies, his funds just get distributed between all his kids. He goes, like, that is not how it works. I know that's not what a living will is, but he said
a trust,
yeah, to a trust. And he said what he specifically does is it would go to, he pays for every kid, their kids, and just for as long as it can, he'll pay for all of them to go through college, all the way through college, and then they're done. They get cut off. They don't get any more. And that's his kids and grandkids going to be in the future. And I was like, man, I like that he doesn't just go, oh, here's $1 billion, $1 million, and, you know, live on it. And so he said he went on a flight one time with his son, and he's like, he made his son sit back and coach, and he's like, Dad, why do
he's in first class?
Yeah, why are you in first class? And he goes, because I make all my money and you didn't. So he goes, go in the back and coach. And I was like, my gosh, like, he's cutthroat with his own kids.
No, it's, you know, I think we could have a whole other conversation about that, because it's true. You know, it's something that he's, as ruthless as it sounds, he's probably right. You know, that's one of my biggest fears, or one of my biggest priorities is to, you know, take care of my kids and give them a better life, but at the same time make them be grateful and respectful and not take it for granted. So I don't think he's wrong at all. But you know what's funny is I've never met Kevin in person, but I had the opportunity to have him do like a little video when I published my SEO book, and he sent me a little kudos video, and he was funny. He was on a plane. He was on an Emirates flight. And it was such a funny video. It was like 3 or 4 minutes long, and he gets on, you know, he's doing a little selfie video, and he's like, "What's up, Damon? Hey, first of all, congratulations on writing a book. Like, that takes a lot, and I know SEO is super important for businesses, especially nowadays, needing to increase visibility." But then it was funny because then this flight attendant goes walking by behind him, and he's like dead stop in the middle of it. Oh. And like grabs this little thing, and it does this like little cheers thing, and he's like sipping on this mimosa or champagne or something, and then carries on like nothing happened.
To be a shark, I think that'd be one of the best jobs in the world, to be an actual shark on the Shark Tank, you know. But I think obviously there's a lot of work that goes into being able to be a shark in general. That's funny. No, very cool. And Tell me about your book. Let's dive into that a little bit. Tell me a little bit about how you wrote that and how that came to be.
Yeah, so I wrote Outrank About. It came out about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. So writing a book was interesting because I've been in the world of business and marketing for 20 plus years, but specifically with SEO National for 14 years. And so over that time, I was like, kind of like we talked about the podcast before. When I started a podcast, I had thought about it for a while, and I finally got to a point where I said I either need to take action or stop putting mental bandwidth towards it. And so I decided to write a book, but part of what I had to figure out at the beginning was I didn't want to just write another marketing book. And so I didn't want it to be, I wanted it to be a technical guide, but because SEO gets technical, I didn't want it to be a boring technical guide. And I wanted it to also be as evergreen as possible. And I know it's not going to be evergreen, but I wanted to kind of like generalize the concepts so you could apply them as SEO evolves. But then I also wanted to share personal stories because I understand the value in communicating stories and making them relatable. And so it was the first couple months was like, okay, how do I balance all that? And so it was just like vomiting all the ideas out to figure out then how to organize them. So what I ended up doing was the book starts with some fun stories about the first billion-dollar company that I beat. And this was like the year before I started my agency, so this was when I was just kind of doing it on the side. And then there's other stories about how I outranked these big international media brands, and I got a cease and desist letter from an attorney, and I looked him up, and he was like a former FTC lawyer, and I was like, okay, I should probably accept that slap on the wrist. And so like I provided these like fun stories, but they're all immediately relevant. They all immediately support the concept of how valuable SEO can be and how much exposure it can bring you and how you can monetize it. So I started by introducing some of these fun stories that slowly educate on the process of SEO to ease you into the more technical stuff. And then the first half is like cool, fun stories to educate on the process, and the last half is a transition into the technical guide. And it's like, okay, here's now that you understand the concepts, here's how you implement them, and here's tools you can use. So it was a fun process to write. It took about 2 years. I took the first year to write it, and then took 2-3 months off. So what was interesting about writing a book is, so my book ended up being about 135 pages. And so you write a book, and then you go, holy crap, I got 135 pages I have to read now. And so then you read it, and then you go, okay, well, chapter 12 would be better as chapter 7. And so then you move a chapter. And then you go, holy crap, I just moved a chapter, so now I got to read the whole thing again. And you just have to like keep reading and condensing what you're doing to make sure it flows. And so you go from moving chapters, to editing and moving pages, to editing, moving paragraphs, then sentences, and then words. So that part, I think, I underestimated, and any other authors I've talked to kind of agree that the editing seems to take longer than the actual writing or the concept. But it's been awesome. I give it away for free. I'll tell listeners at the end how they can get their copy. I pay out of pocket to ship it. I just sent 3 copies to Nigeria yesterday. Whoa. And so like I'll send them wherever, if I can help people. That was the goal, is okay, how do I help small businesses have a fighting chance? Like I had 2 audiences in mind. One is obviously to benefit potential leads and educate them on the process, but then also if there's an entrepreneur or small business that doesn't have the budget, but they have the interest in the time, then they'd have a fighting chance if they were to read it through and put in the work themselves.
Did you decide then to self-publish, or did you find a publisher to help you get it out?
I self-published because when you go with a publisher, you become hyper limited on what you can do with it. And surprisingly, unless you already have like a bestseller, they're not going to do much for you. And in fact, they're probably going to be more restrictive. And so just like I was saying before you asked, I wanted to give away copies, and I wanted to be able to repurpose chunks of text, and I would be giving away the greater part of those rights if I had a publisher do it.
Man, because I want to write and do one eventually too, but I'm like, and I've looked at self-publishing like through Amazon or something, because I'm like, okay, I kind of thought the same thing. Publishers take away those rights, and it's a little difficult. I kind of want to have the freedom to kind of just do what I want with it. But I'm not even close to having one finished to publish, so I haven't even gotten that far. So that's why I was curious. Yeah.
But if you want to use it as a credibility tool, and you want to be able to repurpose it and give it away and just have total freedom, then you'd want to self-publish it.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. And to dive into, obviously, your world is SEO. Obviously, you were proven at it. You're great at it. What would be some of those things if business owners are listening if there's anything that they could do on their own that are maybe the easier ones. You got some technical things, you probably like, backlinking and stuff like that, maybe more technical. But if there's something like they could do a blog on their own or something, we'll dive into that a little bit. What are those three things that a business owner should be trying to do at least on their own if they don't have the funds to maybe hire somebody to do it for them?
The first thing is you have to have realistic expectations. SEO. So if you're not familiar with what SEO is, the abbreviated answer is it stands for search engine optimization. The goal is to show up higher on search engines for words that you can monetize, but without paying for ads. So now the way you do that is largely through credibility. So you have to build up the internal and external credibility of your website. So the logistics behind doing those things, it takes time. Now, the pros and cons of SEO versus paid ads and other forms of marketing are almost complete opposites. So paid ads, they're quicker, but they have a smaller profit margin. And then you always have wild cards with like varying ad spend and competition going up and down, and your ad accounts being disabled and this and that. So SEO doesn't have any of those kind of things. The only downside to SEO is that it takes longer to kick in, but once it's there, it's way more stable. It has a better return on investment. It tends to be the larger source of profit. So it just depends on like where your tolerance is, if you got more time or more money. So before you start though, because it takes longer, I'd say patience is the first thing you got to get in check. Now, assuming you move past that, yeah, blogging is probably one of the easier parts because, and I say easy lightly, like relatively speaking, because I know writing content sucks. Like almost nobody likes writing content. So, but you're either a business owner or an expert at something. And so talk about your expertise and whatever that thing is. So like a free tool that you can use, there's a website called answerthepublic.com. It's a free tool. It's super cool. You go there and there's this really awkward guy on the home screen that's going to make you feel uncomfortable. And so you just like type in a thing, and that the thing you type in is like whatever you want to monetize or whatever your customers would search for. And so you type in that kind of that starter seed word. And so like a random example I always give is shoes. So you type in shoes, and then it's going to go pull data from search engines and all these other places. And what it's going to tell you is what your audience is already asking search engines. So that way you don't have to guess. You can read through it, and it's going to create this like visual diagram where it's the who, what, when, where, and why of shoes. So where are shoes made? What are their soles made out of? When was the first shoe invented? What, just whatever. And so then it can go more granular and you can drill down. And so what you want to do is go through those things and go, what am I an expert in? What can I answer? What is not already beaten up over and over and over as a topic that I can write some sort of unique piece of content on? And so the key is that you have to provide unique content. If you're just going to write and rehash the same crap that's already been told a million times over, you're not going to show up, because you can't rank uniquely unless you present something unique to be read and found by search engines. So writing is usually where most people can contribute, because it doesn't get into the technical things. If you're not a diehard writer, which probably the most of us are not, then where you can start is doing like a selfie video, and then just go on a rant about whatever your thing is, and then you can send that video to websites like dscript.com, and what it'll do is it'll transcribe it. There you go. There's 90% of your blog. Just go on a rant, transcribe it, and then just go polish up the text. And then you have it in your tonality and your voice already. You covered your expertise in the way that you can communicate it from a unique position. Just polish it up after that.
That's okay. And I've heard of Descript before. we don't use it at the moment, but I've heard it's good to transcribe. And because I am not a writer, I tell people all the time, I am not the best at I come up with ideas, but to put it beautifully on paper, no. Doing what you just mentioned, that I could do. Just talking it out and then writing it down, I can do. It sounds way more comfortable. Is there any and then what would you say is the biggest thing that you as an agency handle for the client that's maybe more on the technical side, just to kind of give them an overarching view of going, wow, yeah, there is a lot to this world of SEO?
Well, we do everything. We don't do a la carte components of a campaign, so we take on the entirety of an SEO strategy. So I can kind of walk you through what that is. Sure. Usually where we start is just competitive analysis, keyword research, a lot of the stuff that you would assume, but we get pretty granular on it. So what we do is we go pull a combination of systematic reports and then also manual reviews where, the team's trained eye goes and looks at the industry websites, and there's certain ways businesses will emphasize what they're targeting on a website in certain structure areas. And so we'll go look at those and go, what is the competition doing good and bad? And then even above and beyond what the competition is doing, who cares what they're doing and what opportunities are they missing? And so we'll kind of paint a picture of what the potential targets to monetize are. And then from there, we'll go qualify them, and we'll go, okay, not only what gets searched the most, but ideally what has better buyer intent. I'd way rather take the keyword that only gets searched 100 times a month, but 90 out of 100 people that search that are going to buy, than the keyword that gets searched 1,000,000 times a month, but it's so broad that the audience's accuracy is going to be diluted, and then like 1 out of 1,000,000 is going to buy. And so we look heavily into buyer intent too. And now once we get that figured out, then we go, okay, here's the targets we can monetize. Now, what is the type of content that we can produce that supports targeting that? So like we just covered, you can only rank on search engines for what search engines can read. So we have to create the content from a unique perspective that will support those targets. Then we get into this whole other assembly line of how we repurpose the content from text to visual graphics to video. We introduce podcasts as an SEO strategy. And then, so all of that, I mean, we're usually 6 weeks into it before we even actually start producing the assets, because we spend that time researching and strategizing everything. And then during that, we also have the developers on my team going through and fixing structure updates where they improve the page speed and make sure that the website's mobile friendly. And so I think we're up to like a 200-point checklist that we go through just in the first couple of weeks to go through and go, okay, do we have our foundation established before we go build everything else on top of it?
Okay. And I'm guessing Google My Business is a big part of that, the SEO world for people to rank too?
It depends on the business. The majority of our clients, not so much, because most of our clients are brands or national or international. Google My Business is really powerful for brick and mortar location, and it can amplify your visibility within like a 5 to 10 mile radius of that location. But Google My Business is largely invisible outside of that radius.
Okay. All right. Man. All right. Well, if you were to give somebody then, out of all that stuff we just talked about, the number one thing that they could focus on, this could be SEO or just business in general, maybe that one piece of advice that they could focus on, would it be blogs or would it be just content in general? What's that one thing they could just focus on today?
I think you saying one thing is the answer. Just pick one damn thing. Like, don't try and tackle it all. I mean, I met this nice lady yesterday who found us as a lead through one of our other clients because she saw what we were doing. And she said, hey, I'm a huge fan of so-and-so, and I just love her branding. I love her consistency. I love this. I love that. Just went on this huge, warm appreciation for this other client. And I said, do you know that she's only been at this for about 15 months? Whoa. And it just blew her mind, because the lady she was referring to has over like 12 million views on YouTube. When she came to us, so we don't do YouTube, but she came to us in February of 2020 and said, look, I'm like 3-4 months into YouTube. I'm already up to 1 million or 2 million views. I'm just getting started. I'm crushing it on YouTube. I'm expecting it to continue to grow, and I want to get a head start on SEO. And so then we started consulting with her, and then even though YouTube isn't our main area of expertise, like, I've been at this long enough where I can kind of guide them, but I'll just be clear, like, hey, I'm not going to take that on as an area of responsibility, but like, here's some other things you can consider. And so in consulting with her for that while building up her SEO, she went from 2 million views to 4 million views within like 3 months. We started SEO like 8-9 months after SEO. She had increased, like, I want to say it was 10,000% in organic traffic. And so what I told that lady, I said, the other woman you're referring to, she's just over a year into this. And I said what she did was pick one thing. She picked YouTube, built the processes, figured out how to scale that, and then put it on repeat. Then she said, what's next? What's the next most valuable area that I can play in? And it was SEO for her. So then she came in and said, okay, let's lock in SEO. I don't care about anything else until I get that mastered. Now she's got SEO locked in, and so now she's moving on to the next thing. So I think, we talked about Shark Tank. Mark Cuban made a quote, I'll probably be off a little bit, but he made a quote that said something like, don't drown in opportunity. There's opportunity around us everywhere, but if you try to take it all on, you're going to dilute your returns that you're going to get out of any of them. So just pick one and master it. And then through that process, not only are you going to start getting the return, but you're going to learn a lot about your buyer persona, your company operations, how you want to change this or that, starting something, a new part of it, stopping an existing part of it. You're going to go through this self-discovery phase. And then once you get through that, then you can go, okay, now I can cut the learning curve on the next type of marketing that I'm doing, and then just go do that second one thing at a time. So I would just say pick one thing.
Man, and that's golden, because we had a guest we interviewed yesterday. Same basic thing, pick one thing, and she went on another different avenue talking about it, but they all speak the same thing: as you're more focused. And I know I struggle with that because I have all these ideas. I'm like, oh, I could do this one, I could do this one, and my wife is the perfect one to go, just focus on this one. Let's get this one going, and then you can maybe do that one later. I was like, but what if I miss my opportunity? I got lots of ideas.
I have a lot of other fellow entrepreneurs that have become friends that have had a lot of success, and the ones that juggle multiple things, they all hate it. Every time I talk to them about it, and they're like, hey, I started this other thing, or whatever the status update they give me is. And anytime I say in passing, like, hey, that's cool, I've thought about doing other things, but I just want to stay focused. And every single one of them says, don't do it. And it turns into this opposite. The conversation then flips, because it was me giving them kudos and saying congratulations on balancing multiple things, and it instantly goes the other way around, and it becomes a conversation of don't do it. I admire the position you're in, Damon, every single time.
I will keep that in mind. And as we close out, Damon, how can people get in contact with you? And then the free book that you mentioned, how can people get a book?
Yeah, well, congrats on your new podcast. Thanks for having me. So if you want to get the book, it's available at freeseobook.com. You can grab a PDF copy there. There's no upsell on the thank you page, and invites you to a Facebook group. That's it. If you want the physical copy, it's on Amazon, and then it's titled Outrank, and then it also just got put up on Audible a couple months ago, and so it's on Audible as well.
Fantastic. Well, Damon, obviously, again, thank you so much for giving time. I know you got a lot of employees, you got a big business. I appreciate you taking the time to chat about SEO for the listeners, and obviously wish you nothing but the best in book sales and business growth as the rest of 2021 plays out.
Thanks. Good luck with the podcast. Appreciate the chat.
Well, as you probably guessed before you even heard this episode, SEO is a pretty technical thing, and it involves a lot of moving parts. But when you have a guy like Damon who can break it down, make it easy, and take it off your plate, you're obviously in good hands, and you don't have to worry about it. So if SEO is something that you're in need of for your company, I would encourage you to reach out to Damon or myself, and we can get you taken care of and make sure that you don't have to worry about it anymore. We'll be here next week with another awesome guest on the Finally Marketing That Works podcast. We'll see you then.